Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I want you to I keep saying put your seatbelt on, and I'm not sure. I'm just so excited. Before I introduce you to our guest and the topic today, here is a quote just for this episode. Love is the expression of the one who loves, not of the one who is loved. Soren Kierkegaard. Our guest today, a friend of the Culture Matters podcast. If you've listened to the show, you know them or should. They the Batman of Culture Matters, tile by day, culture by night, the Warlock. Um, for many years, they led, I believe, in the biblical sense, in a more formal sense. And for the last handful of years, we've been friends ever since meeting through the 30 days of thought expression of my own development in leadership and humanness. We explore various topics on this show of interest to us around the philosophical nature and leadership nature and human nature, consciousness, and so much. If you haven't heard Nathan Merrill on the show before, I challenge you to type in his name on the Culture Matters podcast, and you'll see well over a dozen episodes, all very different on topics that can change your life, I think, at least lead to curiosity. Today we're exploring a book that um, I've been reading for years and never finished. One of my favorite books that I've ever come across by one of my most influential thinkers in my life so far, Soren Kierkegaard, who's no longer with us, and it's called Works of Love. Nathan actually has the book, and we recently read a chapter in the book we're going to talk about, among other things. So, welcome Nathan to the show, and thanks for taking the time to explore this author, this thinker. It's been so they've been for our audience, they've been instrumental in this show, whether I realize it or not, or whatever degree I think, because of the impact they've had on me. They're one of the big influences. I'm curious to ask you too throughout this, like who are some of the, if you were to nail down some of your big influences intellectually and so on. But thanks for coming on. I got a million questions.
Yeah, it's always exciting. I'm always happy. These conversations typically take us down intellectual rabbit holes, philosophical rabbit holes, and I feel it physiologically in my body. So I actually have I, I pastored for 10 years and I would never get nervous before delivering a sermon or speaking in front of people, that sort of thing. But after, I would always have like a come down period where physically it was very demanding. So I would get kind of the shakes. I would get a little strange feeling in my body. And I haven't done that for a number of years, but now I do this podcast with you. And to be honest, the deepest intellectual or philosophical conversations that I have are on this podcast. And so it's different, but it's the same in that now I get them before I get this anticipatory anxiety and I get real it's not tense, it's just like jittery almost. I get kind of shaky in my body, a little unstable feeling. And I don't know why. I'm only saying all that to say that I
Interesting.
really look forward to these. I think it's because um, there's just a mental expression that gets to take place that throughout the course of most of my time, it only happens inside, right? And so I don't get the opportunity to express it externally. And something about my being knows that it gets ramped up. It's like we're about to go into some stuff.
Well, it's such a fitting way to start this show because of who Kierkegaard was, I think. See,
Mhm.
I want to be clear. I don't, I am not the scholar on Kierkegaard. First of all, I don't even know if I'm saying his name right. So I want to
Yeah,
say
I mean,
that
that's how I
too.
hear it.
I'm not, yeah, because I've heard people say guard, and then I've heard people say without saying the RD, because
Yeah, yeah.
it's spelled.
I think he
Kiergaard.
was
Danish.
Danish or Flemish or something like that. And so who knows? I'm not a
But I'm
linguist.
not the scholar that I hope to be on him someday. And the reason, and I want to preface that because my own insecurity, since we're sharing openly, right? Is that I think if we come to understand him in time, he was someone, if I think I know him, who focused intently on thinking around anxiety.
Mm-mm.
He even has a book that at some point maybe we'll navigate called the concept of anxiety. Have you ever heard of that book?
Yeah. So the two books by Kierkegaard that I've read are that one and
Oh,
what's the other one? Fear and Trembling. Is that what it's called? Fear and Trembling?
yes, yes. About Abraham.
I, yeah, he has a handful of books. I'm not a Kierkegaard scholar either. I don't even know what that, scholar, who knows what exactly that means. I read him and understand him, and at the same time, I hear other people talk about him, and my intuitive thought is you can call yourself a scholar, but I don't know that you quite understand him. So, what exactly that means, I don't know. Do you have his
All right, here's how I'm
biographical?
trying to here's the this is actually good. Yeah, I want to go in this direction. Here's how I think so Edna Hong and her husband, who I can't remember his first name, they have this collection. They translated Kierkegaard's work over the history of their academic career. There's this collection of 26 of his books they have translated because there's a library in his home country dedicated to him. Like in one of the colleges, the library dedicated to, but they have, and it's a collection of a box set that I have had on my wish list for some time to invest in, and I'd love to go through. But yeah, like these two people picked it. It seems like their life just to understand this, almost like I think some of these professors put themselves like similar to what somewhat of I'm going to try to do today. Put myself and think, how would Kierkegaard address this, or how would he look at this, or how would he look at that? And they translate these works and they attempt to make them digestible for whatever epoch that we're in, whatever
Mhm.
generation that we're in. So that's how I think how I'm looking at that. Like the scholar, like they've dedicated their life to. They don't. It's almost like they don't have an opinion themselves. They just are a steward of the likely opinion of the thinker. So, for example, we might have in the future listeners of the Culture Matters podcast that ask, what would Nathan Merrill say about this?
Yeah. Well, the spirit of doing things in that way is actually very Kierkegaardian. If you think about it, that's kind of what he talks about in Love, Believing All Things. Um,
Ooh.
I don't know. I have always just been intellectually curious. And so if an idea catches my attention, I don't want to word this without being grandiose about it. My mind is very ADHD. It just goes into whatever it goes into. And so the temptation to become a scholar on any one individual in history is great with like every book I pick up, I read, I think, oh, I really want to understand. But what I find over time is that for me is not really worth my effort. It's 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 more beneficial, I've found, in terms of the own psychological development of my mind and kind of the contextual understanding of my place in the world has been to get what I can from an author. And if I really click with them, get more. And if
Mm.
I don't click with them, I try and I really try and get it. But
Hmm.
there's harmonic kind of things happening between different types of people and types of authors. And
What would Kierkegaard say? Because you read the concept of anxiety. Was
Mhm.
there, what was your takeaway from that before we go into works of love?
I love his idea of of anxiety being an intrinsic proof of certain transcendent ideals. In works of love, in this chapter we're about to discuss, Kierkegaard approached a lot of his topics with a very it's a very Eastern. I bring so much back to Eastern ways of seeing things, but it's not Eastern, it's not Western. East and West are two sides of the same corn, two sides of the same coin, really, when you boil it down. So with his concept of anxiety, I just love the fact that he did not necessarily address anxiety entirely with a spear like it was to be tackled. He addressed it in a within a psychological framework in which it showed you how that anxiety has a place within narrative. Anxiety has a place within the unfolding of one's life, and he used it almost as a proof of way of of describing beingness of life itself. Um, I don't know if that makes sense. Um,
Oh, I have a question on that actually, because there's a quote by him that's stuck with me, and I'm first of all, I'm gonna have to read it because, but it's basically, I think it's from a book I haven't, the lily on the field or something. It's like, or
yes,
I'll find
yes,
it,
he's quoting
but it's like
Matthew.
the self is not a relation. The self is the relation of the relation. Did you pick up anything like that in it? Like,
Yeah,
all right, so here's my question that you just said it's anxiety, not taking on as a spear, but a component or a component of beingness or being in the world. Like,
hmm
am I interpreting this in the right way to say they're following a they're it's like we're what's that ride that goes in that's a circle and it goes up and around a little bucket Ferris wheel?
yep.
We're in a Ferris wheel, and we're in a Ferris wheel, and we are seeing the world through at heights, different heights, so we can see different things.
hmm
So we're experiencing the world in different dimensions, or how do you say that? Different lenses.
They're different. They're like different psychological perspectives.
Yeah, so like personally, after I got in that car accident, I went on a Ferris wheel and I had a panic attack.
hmm
I never had a panic attack on a Ferris wheel prior to being paralyzed. I, 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 there was some type of psychological association with me being on that Ferris wheel, and who I was on it with was the exact person that crashed.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
see where the
Well,
psychological case is like being built. So it's an
right.
experience I've had before. Like the medium is the same.
hmm
I am different. I'm with the same person in that accident. The medium is the same. My experience of it is different. I'm seeing and at a certain part in that experience of going up the Ferris wheel, how I was relating to the experience was different than at a different height a different part of that drama. I'm looking at that as like a drama.
hmm Yeah, and your awareness of that whole transaction is only surface level. Your awareness of that, uh, uh, your whole being has awareness that's inert. It's like it's the awareness of your whole being. But the thing that we articulate internally through thought or through reason or logic or even articulate externally, it's a very surface level mode, or not mode. It's a very surface level expression. We equate the mind with the thought of the mind, but the thought of the mind is just the thing which comes to the surface. It's the product of the mind. It's the product of expression. but it is not the expressor. Your being in the world is expressed through the whole thing. Like the whole thing is the expression of mind. And so you're you're having experience where there's kind of like this harmonic, there's this resonant thing happening where there's parts of a historical experience that's in your record now. It's inertly in you. And so it's not just your logical expression that like you the way that you communicate, you might associate your being with that, but that wasn't the you that figured that out. It was your being in the world that made certain patterned connections. And that's we get these experiences of deja vu and that sort of thing. History doesn't repeat itself, but it's definitely it's repetitious patterns, things that happen over and over and over again. And so here you are with the same. There's enough of the underlying denominators there that obviously you would have a physiological thing in the body because there's knowledge within you. It's inside of you that was just placed there through the nature of those transactions, those events. That now it's like me getting a little bit worked up before we get on here. It's like we've never
Mm.
had this conversation. I don't necessarily have a lot of logical thought that I could put to that, but I do have an intuition about the experience. So I the intuition about the experiences is where I think a lot of valuable lessons in life lie because you're trying to tune into your whole being. You want to tune into all of you, which so much of that is inaccessible. But to be sure, far more of it is accessible to your experience if you don't necessarily approach it through the surface level articulation, through logic alone, through thought alone.
Here's the quote I want to share with you. We can start with this stuck with me and kind of changed my life in a lot of ways. The self is a relation which relates itself to its own self,
Mhm.
or it is that in the relation that the relation relates itself to its own self.
There's a quote. He says something else along those exact same lines in the
It's not
chapter
the
we just did.
relation, but the self is not the relation, but that the relation relates itself to its own self. So that last piece there, I feel like we can grab onto. And yeah, if you can alliterate it from that chapter on, because the chapter is love being all things. Love cannot be deceived, even though it can be. If I understood it correctly, it can literally be, well, no, that I'm not saying that right at all. Love cannot be deceived. The deceiver can deceive, but the deceived cannot be deceived. And like he goes into a hard argument on that. But yeah,
Yeah.
please. What were you gonna say? I'm sorry. I wanted to add
Well,
that.
I think
It helped.
the spirit, I think the real gist of this chapter is it's a dispositional thing. It's a mode of being in the world. It's an embodiment of love that in and of itself has no antagonistic nature. So it embodies all things as if all things were um, okay. And if you think of if you think of all of existence as an expanding happening, which is chronological, because within existence your instantiation is bounded, we tend to create story arcs and narratives and psychological dispositions which skew, not skew, invert. It almost inverts our relationship to the bigger picture, if you will, because of the boundedness of it. But in terms of the whole, like the universe, all things in and of themselves, we can ask ourselves, like, okay, that may be true for the individual, but what could be happening on a larger level of analysis? And just asking the question itself is what opens you up to a different dispositional possibility in the world. And so I think when you read that, that's in First Corinthians chapter 13, and it's very interesting. When I used to be a pastor, I would dwell a lot on that chapter for that exact reason, believeth all things. It's it's counterintuitive to the mind that's interested in defending logical propositions, but is perfectly in line with being itself that just is. Truth is. Truth doesn't need a defender. It is. So the thing that he said in the chapter, I like this. He says, because of this, all patient and in the spiritual sense, passionless observers, that's an assumptive statement, but we'll go with it, who expertly seek understanding by piercing the inner man inquiringly and deeply. So it's going into the self, going into the nature of being.
What page you
Um,
on?
216 at the very bottom. Because of this is where it starts.
I see.
He says these
Yep.
very ones judge very cautiously or abstain from judgment entirely because enriched by observation, they have an enlarged conception of the enigmatic world and of the hidden, and because as observers they have learned to rule their passions. Now that last bit I don't quite know about because I think biologically the passions themselves are they're catalysts of sorts. So we're not going to disregard them as something to be dominated. But the point just before that, though, the enlarged conception of the enigmatic world, that's where love is. It's an expansive thing to the psyche. Believing all things is expansive to the psyche because it opens you up to a dispositional relationship to people in which you're not looking to demarcate. You're not looking to divide. You're looking to see the ways in which collaboration is taking place. This is our relationship in the world. Your biologically, your body in the world is not like I, as an individual in the world, am not looking to um, destroy my environment. Now we have competitive biological drive, which, there's the kink in existence, it's the cannibalistic nature of existence. But love, being this expansive dispositional way of being, is something that allows you to see truth not as you are projecting it from the inside, but as it is from their inside to you, if that makes sense. It's kind of an inverse of
Is it helping us avoid broken signals?
I think so, because in real time it allows you to I think it's a mode of being that is conditioned, right? It's not something it's people are the way that they are. If we're going to use layman's terms, we'll say someone is negative dispositionally. Um, they're a Debbie Downer, right? They're looking for problems. They have conflict with everyone. They're in defensive mode nonstop. They're reactionary. Someone says something and they're gonna one up it. They're gonna contradict it. That's a conditioned way of being. So in terms of and the only way that that mode of being can work is if you truly are the ultimate arbiter of truth, and nobody is that. So it's a mode of being that, while it has its place concerning the narrative of existence because it creates that given full tension of conflict. Um, it's not necessarily in regards to anxiety. It's not necessarily a way that you want to be. And so, in terms of you're talking about the ways in which communication falls short, the ways in which what a person is the sentiment, right? We try and capture sentiment with articulation, and oftentimes there's a gap.
That's a component. So like I could my based on my own self-concept,
Hmm.
my own experience, my own construct, I'm going to bring that self projection into my relationship. It's me and
Hmm.
my counterpart. I'm going to
Right. So
bring it
there's
in.
where we can,
I'm going
yes.
to bring into it so there could be on a spectrum of probability, my assumptions will be wrong and they'll be right.
Hmm.
Like it's not gonna be 100% right. It'll be on a spectrum. So that's one point of it. Like the love piece can help me turn the other cheek, even on a micro, like word for word, letter by letter, sentence by sentence. he's going in. That's one component to that I'm taking from this conversation, this chapter, his argument. Another more, and that's more subtle or indirect. The other
Hmm.
piece that I think he's more aggressively tackling is when there is in, I don't want to say objective, but let's more actual transgression.
Hmm.
There's an agreed upon transgression. It's like
Right.
I've been deceived. I've been transgressed upon. I want to that there's a redeeming quality there, or a synthesis
Right.
quality, or a. I want to make sure I follow your thought earlier though, because you said the point part of on page 216 above the
Shut a
because
pencil.
piece. What's the point he was making at that exact? What was the context? How much of the hidden may still reside, like halfway through the page on page 216, how much of the hidden may still
Hmm.
reside in a person, or how much may still reside hidden? How how inventive hidden inwardness is in concealing itself and in deceiving or invading others. Bashfully afraid of being seen and deathly afraid of becoming completely exposed. It prefers that others do not even suspect its existence. Is it not true that one man never completely understands another? But if he does not understand the other completely, then it always remains possible that what is most indisputable could still have a completely different interpretation, which, mark well, would be the true interpretation, inasmuch as a hypothesis may superbly explain a great multiplicity of instances. He's going on, are we ultimately at some degree never on the fully the same page?
Yeah, well, this is why love is a supreme thing because you're right. On the surface, what he's directly addressing, I would say, is singular instances of injustice. How do we cope with, how do we deal with what ought to be our dispositional nature toward the singular instance in which someone does wrong to us? And it's a very
Whether
Christian
intentional or
ethic.
not.
Yes, yes. Well, the intentionality of it, love is the type of there's an how do I want to word this? I think that the supreme embodiment of love is the thing which helps us disregard the intentionality of it. The intentionality of it is almost not important in
Is
if
it an abdication of responsibility as a human?
no, because what is done to you is not in your basket of things you can control, as opposed to what you do.
No, no,
And
we're saying the
so,
same thing. I'm saying in the wrong order. It's an abdication responsibility to be attached to that.
yes, yes,
That's
yes,
what I'm
it's an
trying to say.
abdication, right? It's an abdication of
It's backwards
responsibility
what you would
because
think rationally.
right, it's almost an alchemical thing. It's a very Jungian thing. It's that you have embodied an ethos, you've embodied a spirit which almost is you ever see those gel blocks that like people that shoot guns and bow and arrows and that sort of stuff? They're trying to understand the performance characteristics of ballistics, and they shoot them into these blocks. And these blocks are just these things which just absorb it. It just takes it.
Yes.
Um, it that's kind of the Christian ethos, if you will, and Christ pathos, ethos, logos, which would it be
I
ethos?
totally agree with that.
Yeah, so it's yes, it's a way of being too, and it's a way of being in the world that will set you apart. People notice when you're in dialogue, when you're in conversation with them, and I'm only saying this as it's pertinent to this conversation. I talk with people all the time that try and understand. They want to know what it is about, in this instance, me specifically. I'm not saying I'm a perfect Kierkegaardian example or Christian example of this type of love, but I can only put my finger on the fact that there, for a long, long time, there was an antagonistic nature within me that I looked at and looked at. I looked at it long enough until I recognized what it was, and it was simply a place where love had not prevailed.
Hmm.
And I don't speak with that language toward people. It's only embodied now in almost a conditioned way to where I'll be in dialogue and there's a recognition of it's like an absorption, it's like say something wrong to me, lie to me, do what you want, do what you will. It's not that I seek that sort of thing.
What
It's that
about,
you
wait,
are.
is it, what about the distinction between absorption and filter? Like,
Yes, well,
remember when I was a
filter.
kid, we had the filter that we put in the water because
Mhm.
we didn't have the good sink, the good sink, the sink that filtered the water. So we had to get this Brita thing that we put the
Right.
water in the Brita and it would filter the water, and then I would drink water out of that thing. So it was an
Right.
extra medium was in a broker, the broker of value, right?
Yeah.
So there's the water, there's the sink. The Brita thing was in the fridge. You put you get the Brita filter out of the fridge, you put it under the sink, you turn the water on, it fills it up, you put it back in the fridge. The water now takes 10 minutes, it goes through it, and now it's clean water. And now I can take that out of the fridge and put it in my cup and drink the water.
Hmm.
I am called in works of love to be the intermediary, to be the Brita filter. How you relate to me, that happens before the filter. That's the sink being turned on and the water coming out. What you do to me, how you relate to my relation.
Hmm.
If I'm a relation relative to your relation, how you relate to my relation.
How I relate to the action. So there's three things following the metaphor of the absorption versus the filter. Um, Christ, when he is dying on the cross, he says, "I am become a worm." There's another passage where the Bible lays out this idea that he became sin, right? So there's a passage that says he became sin for us who knew no sin. So here, think about the irony of this example. You have a sinless individual who takes the sin of the world, at least in the Christian symbolism. He takes the sin of the world not just upon him, but into his own being. He becomes it. Um, and that's a supreme sacrifice. Paul says in another passage, I like how also, Jay, when we have conversations, so much of my theological background comes up because I don't pastor anymore, but so many of the religious lessons that were there are applicable outside of religious framework,
Well,
right? This isn't.
if I don't take all the sin, if my employees make a mistake and I don't take all the sin,
Yes, you at the head of the organization, it is up to you how much of that responsibility you want to shoulder. And the Christian example, right? The example of Christ is you take all of it. You take every bit of it. Now, that does not necessarily mean that you're not proactive. Christ, remember, he taught his disciples, he performed miracles, he set up certain structural things, but in the outcome, in what would happen in relation to that, um, he turned the other cheek, right? And so the absorption, the filter, I think in that metaphor, those things would relate to reaction or action. And so this idea of love encompasses both. You react in love and you act in love.
I want to say
And
this for
there's
the audience to make sure they're at least getting, they're following. Kierkegaard, we
mhm,
should probably tell them, what is Kierkegaard trying to teach us? He's saying love believes all things, yet is
mhm,
never deceived. So
mhm.
how could something that believes all things never be deceived in a deceiving world, in a
Um,
how could I mean use that in a practical sense. I believe
yeah,
everything everyone tells me. I can never be deceived. Well, if you lie to my face, I am.
well, I think this is where,
I'm trying to make it like like very lay, like simplistic because
yes, yes,
I think if we don't grasp that, we're gonna miss the power, there's a transformational power
right,
to this concept. And the reason I say that is because, well, it's I have seen it very
yeah,
practically in business. People that somebody leaves their company and they try to destroy them.
hmm.
I've
So they're not,
I believe that
sorry,
they will end up attracting more of what they
right,
think they got. Like I've seen it. It doesn't mean I'm right, but I'm sorry. I just some. It's like if we can grab a hold of like he's saying that love, like at the chapter on page 213, love believes all things and yet is never deceived.
hmm.
Why is it
There's,
never deceived?
I think there's a universal medicine at play. It's a relationship with deception that recognizes there's a presuppositional relationship with the world, and that presuppositional relationship is that to bring it back to maybe the words of Christ, he said in one passage regarding Judas Iscariot, he said that it is impossible, but that offenses will come. These things are going to happen, but woe be to the man by whom. And so what he's saying is there's a recognition that certain events will transpire. These events will happen. If you dwell in a mode that embodies love, which can never be deceived, and yet something happens to you, or someone's they pulled the wool over your eyes, you still your relationship to that event, you, you don't have to abdicate your sovereignty over your own individual beingness in the world in relationship to the way that things and people transgress against you. And so love is the only,
Well, okay, I want to add to that. No, I like where you're going because I think that's a big part of what he's saying. But what
well,
about
I haven't gotten to like the, yeah, there's the ontological part of it where it's like, I made a note where it's what one perceives in the world is what is perceivable in the self, right? So there's that factor of it too. What you perceive in the world is perceivable in the self. So there's love also has an illuminating factor internally, right? So the way that love illuminates the self internally, the being internally, is your you're shedding light on the darkness within you, right? And so there's also this deeper underlying principle of what he's saying in the way in which we relate to the world. You can't relate to the world through love if you've not first related to the self through love. And if you relate to the self through love, now there's also a warning in the scriptures about deceiving the self. Be not deceived is over and over and over again. Don't deceive. Self-deception is more dangerous than a deception from an other. And there's no difference. Once you recognize that there is no difference and you've overcome, as it were, the deception that is within, you dwell with yourself in love. And now you can dwell in a mode of being where it's uh, in real time, you're recognizing the ways in which self transgression is happening because of the relationship
I
with an other.
I think there's a relationship with self-deception and to our capacity to there's a
To love
relationship with self.
others
Yeah,
or
that's what
hate
I'm
others.
trying to say. It like the actuality of it. Like I
Right.
could say I don't yeah, as someone listening to this, I agree with all this. You know, it, it- except, fuck those people.
That's always there though, right? The snake is in the garden. So that's the dynamical. There are forces at play that at the end of it, this is where the Calvinists would stand up and say, yes, but you know, we don't understand um, the onus though, the onus of responsibility in terms of logically, illogically, I don't know how to take these thoughts, but the onus of responsibility, while you may possess the awareness of transgression, you may possess the ways in which it is perfectly logical and correct to have that type of reaction to someone. You still have a power within you that will be either destroyed or fostered through love. Um, at least I think that would be the whole spirit of this turn the other cheek, and that's not to say that you go out there as a proud self martyr and you're asking for these things upon yourself, but it is as a consequence of embodying love and truth. You will have ample opportunity to to test the calculation to find out, like, am I this or not. Was I following back a few paragraphs of words ago? You had pointed at two things he was saying, and I was trying to pick up on the deeper thing he was saying. Was I following that?
There's this whole other part of the conversation that relates to the other parties, to the other party, and
Right.
what they could manifest having been loved.
Yes, it's transformational.
How is my
So,
enemy supposed to transform if they're really my enemy, and that's like they're the enemy of the people?
mhm.
How are they supposed to transform absent love?
Yes, well, you can adopt their rules or your rules. And this is where faith comes in. It's, will I transform them through the ways in which they relate to me, or will I transform them through the ways in which I relate to them? And so it's a declaration of faith that there's behavioral teaching and there's articulated teaching, right? We can use it through symbol and word. I can tell you with my words how it ought to be, or I can show you through my actions how it ought to be. And both of those modes, um, they're both powerful modes of teaching. They're both true modes of teaching, but it's an inverse thing. It's like if the behavior toward you is a transgression, then perhaps it's your responsibility to speak with words which are the inverse of it, right? So it's not fighting fire with fire. In this instance, is fighting fire with water, or the opposite. Say there's a behavioral transgression. Your your responsibility, in or not behavioral transgression. Say there's an articulated transgression. Perhaps your responsibility in that moment is to say nothing, right? Answer a fool according to his folly, or answer not a fool according to his folly. So it's a contextual thing. I think love is the thing which allows us to step back from all of that and intuitively know, like, what is the thing in me that would get the feeling of vindication? And is that an embodiment of love, or is that embodiment of just
Everyone is
just
welcome in my house, and while they're there, they're loved. If they choose to leave, that's their choice. How they leave will reflect our culture. How I relate to them as they relate to me and the culture, right? The house
Mhm.
reflects their the dimension by which they operate and conduct themselves in space time. But how I show up relative to them, what I say and don't say, what I do and don't do, that combination influences what they say and don't say and do and don't do. There's a dance.
Hmm.
While they're in my home, everyone is welcomed in my home, the metaphorical womb. They
Hmm.
have to walk to it or trek to it, or while they're there, they get love. If they leave, it's they choose to do it. How how the culture relates to them reveals the culture. How I relate to them reveals my character while they're within that womb. Now, the I think that the issue here is that I could lose my life living out this value system.
Hmm.
Like, right
Well,
in the, I if we're playing a logical game, the person that
right,
wins that wins like that competes to win kills me and takes my shirt and
right,
my booty, right? My treasure.
right.
They've sunken.
Well,
So how low they are is relative. Like there's a pit, there's a
hmm.
-1 and -10 million are different levels of energy.
Hmm.
+1 and +10 million are different levels of energy. I'm making the arg I think Kierkegaard generally in his work is making the argument that the majority of humans that walk the earth, that have ever walked the earth, live somewhere between 0 and 1,
Yes.
and are overly focused on the people that are living at .9 and .1 or .00001. And there aren't nearly as many negative, it doesn't even take, maybe this is what Peterson's trying to get at, like it doesn't even take that many -2s and 3s and 4s to create Auschwitz. It takes a whole
Right.
bunch of .00087s and plus ones that think they're plus a million. But how we relate to somebody that's -50
Hmm.
is what actually signifies where we fall in that -10 million to +10 million. Now, when I was using this arbitrary, like metaphorical out, number system here is to make a point of there's something to do with energy. Like I want to think that Jesus Christ, his level of energy
Hmm.
was a higher level of energy than it's like you ever see Dragon Ball Z?
Yes. Yeah, he's matching. He's an energetic matching that's taking place. But you're right in that it's an inverse thing. He did die, right? He did die. So that's what the other day we were texting about this, and I said it's very Socratic in nature. And I think when people hear that, they think it's maybe like the Socratic method. And I wasn't necessarily referring to the Socratic method. I was referring to the way in which Socrates died. Socrates willingly went to his death in a scenario in which those around him were basically begging him not to do that. But he was holding the transgression to its form. And when he held the transgression to its form, the thinking is, well, the form of it will break. And Christ in his death, there's another passage in Corinthians where it says that he removed the sting of death. Well, he died, I mean, so the energetic thing is very interesting. I believe that you're right. Um, Kierkegaard actually addresses that in this on page 223. He says that the the difficulty therefore is elsewhere. There is a lower sphere of understanding which has no intimation of true love and of love in and for itself. You see, in and for itself. Right? That's what I was referring to earlier. The alchemy, the relationship of the self to love and love for others is is really a blurred line. They're one and the same. He says, and of this blessedness in itself. The difficulty is that a great multiplicity of illusions will hold a man down in this lower sphere of understanding, where deception and being deceived signify exactly the opposite of what they signify in the infinite conception of love. So earlier in the chapter, he talked about an awakening to a larger enigmatic world of the hidden, right? So if you if you like really pay attention to all the hippies and the stuff they love saying, they're always talking about vibrations, right? A higher vibration or a lower vibration, that sort of thing. In karmic language, right? If we were to go way to India, the East, and that sort of thing, they're talking about energetic points in the body, or you got these nadis and chakras and that sort of stuff, and they're raising energies up and down through the body and so on and so forth. Well, if we were to be just very physicalist about it and Western in the way that we think, there's certain feelings associated with uh, uh, interaction in the mind. There's feelings associated with interaction in the heart. There's feelings associated with interaction in the groin, right? Sexual desire, that kind of stuff. Boil it all down on a physical level, we're talking physics, that sort of thing. It is an energetic thing, right? So there's potency to the different drives. You've got biological drives, and there's potency to them. There's a strong
Oh, I love
potency
that.
to, yeah. So there's an energetic drive associated with intellectual endeavor, and you think about the fruit of,
I
for
want to
instance.
throw something into this on that and that drive. In a pathological colonialist hedonistic
Mhm,
expression of energy. I
right.
have 1,000 suitors.
Yep.
I'm eating apples. I'm eating orange. My diet. I'm eating food. Some of it is shitting out. Some of it is processing in my cells.
It's all
And
it's all
I'm
related to,
and
sorry.
I'm putting. I'm no. Let's say I'm. Who is that famous? There's like he has a huge journalistic diary autobiography of his life. He was a hedonistic lover of women. He was like, there's a book. He's like he famous.
Modern day, or just died a little bit ago?
No, like a medieval
Uh,
type, like famous
because
suitor of like kings and queens and kings' wives and like there's a famous like hookup
like
culture
Solomon.
guy, like one of these obscure figures, but he was like
Mhm.
the womanizer, So economically, energy,
Right.
all of his energy was being
Yep.
dispersed in that form. Like I'm with, a suitor one time. Part of the value of monogamy is like that energy that I give to my my mirror is coming back to my culture.
Right.
It like so I want to use this as I want your opinion on like this. It's one to many versus one to one. It think of it like a circle, like the energy. Now that doesn't just because I'm operating through that mode of being, sensual desire, that doesn't mean that all that energy is coming back. There has to be other integration happening. Vision, mission, goal, values, labor, you know, because now we're talking about being the founder of a family, the founder of a
Mhm.
civilization, of a
So
different
it
type of
has to do with which,
civilization.
yeah, which ideals you embody.
The time and space that I'm occupying with that one person, this is a great leap in theory. The one person can potentially have more energy that's staying with me
Hmm.
It's exponential versus giving energy to 10,000 different suitors. Like there's only so much time and space that I'm going to occupy reality.
Hmm.
So if I'm with 10,000 different suitors, those are 10,000 different moments with one suitor with an infinite possibility of suitors is more energy focused on myself. The more selfish thing to do, but it's like selflessly selfish, is to throw myself into this monogamous. I'm saying I'm making an argument from an energy standpoint, like return on energy, because I'm only going to eat so
Right.
much food and synthesize so much energy that I'm reinvesting back in. So the selfish person, the hedonistic person that might think I'm going to get the most from my displacement of energy is like Bruce Lee saying, it's better to do one kick 1,000 times than 1,000 than one than 1,000 kicks one time.
So think of the symbol, the Star of David, right? A, a you've got an amount of energy at a high scale coming down to a point, and then on the inverse, you've got an amount of energy coming to a point this way. I think that if you were to symbolize these hierarchies of energy, there's a relationship, an inverse relationship, where, how do I want to word this? I would say as an ideal becomes less tangible, the energy will flow into a more and more singular point. So it's going to have a purpose in terms of chronological progression. But on the flip side of that, as energy is dissipated and distributed more equally in this symbol that we're using, it's going to have less chronological push to it, but it's going to have more real time body, right? This is a very difficult idea for me to articulate. In the 60s, right, when everyone's like eating mushrooms and taking acid, there's the problem of you become too blissed out. And so yes, you're dwelling in this hedonistic state of self-love, but the hedonistic state of self-love is too dissipatory.
But I can't love myself if I don't act love out with the counterpart that I think is unlovable. That's his point.
Mhm.
Love can't be deceived, but I'm living my life in a way where I believe it can be deceived. I'm not actually a lover. I'm the hater.
Mhm.
I'm the loveless person. I'm not giving
Well,
myself. And if society if I can't even love, what if, the betrothal is a meditation to, and it's the true betrothal, giving my full self is a
yes, yes,
meditation to practice love
right,
because I am not self-aware enough and emotionally regulated enough to
right.
I'm not loving enough. I can't even have, how can I have a relationship with God if I can't even have a relationship with like a
Well, they
spouse?
both of these modes of being have place in the world, and if we were to look at the instantiation, the 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 examples of these beings, um, it's hierarchical, and so on like a Gaussian bell curve,
So
right? You
this
have your
Peterson
tail.
talks about this though. You like that, and this is like a Jungian,
Mhm.
Rogerian, many of his influences. Like get yourself together, get your marriage together, get your
Right,
parenting together.
right,
Be like have all of those in order. Get your education together, get your career together. And first of all, is there ever even a getting together? They're constantly in flux and in conflict because they're not
right.
natural. They're supernatural. They're beyond nature. Nature
Hmm.
is like don't die, procreate, don't die, procreate, kill,
they're meta structures, they're cognition structures, they're structures
but
within
aren't they also a
reality.
consequence of our civilizational
They
context?
are. They are, which is still it's a give and take thing. It's a this and that thing. They both.
Pagans didn't love,
I would argue to say that many of them do, um, but it's love.
or is he wrong about everything? And the Ubermensch is where Kierkegaard actually sees where his works of love manifest in the species at scale. Not in one guy who came down to die for everybody because we couldn't, you know, all right, somebody has to, kill his son just so everybody, because the bar is so fucking low
Mhm.
of actual representation of love.
Right, right,
Our maker literally had to kill his kid just so we could have
right.
enough space to be pieces of shit. So what if
Yeah,
like this is all just a fucking foreshadow to the
yeah.
Ubermensch, which is like Kierkegaard's. This is the thing I have with all these existentialists. They're not religious.
No, yeah, right. No, there
They're
are a
they're
lot of
not.
no. Well,
I don't know. I
it
also don't
takes
understand them. So
it takes that to define this, and I think that there are truths that you only arrive at through the embodiment of that perspective. And it's not necessarily a right or wrong. See, we're reverting to an antagonistic framework, which is actually kind of what he's addressing with the embodiment of believing all things. I think that there are things about both of these perspectives that you have to recognize as culturally relevant, relevant for the species, relevant for evolutionary purposes. There's so many ways to approach these topics, um, and that's I this is a phenomenal book, but there's so many of the things that he says that, well, they're true on this level of analysis, but not necessarily true on that level of analysis. And so I think that culturally, what our species is doing is playing one big insane game. It's all insanity. I mean, really, these are they're abstract notions. All of it, everything that we're doing right now is just abstract notions, but they're powerful. And so that's where the energetic component comes in. And so it's like you can't when Christ is being crucified, they ask Pilate the question, and Pilate's answer is, "What is truth?" And I thought, well, what a philosophical man he was, about to kill the Son of God and wrestling with the nature of truth. And you could see how in this Star of David symbolism that I was talking about earlier, and depending on how you're looking at this or that, there's a song I was listening to recently that says, this is dangerous too, because this sort of stuff, dwelling on this, there's a practicality to Dr. Peterson's philosophy that I love, and that is, on the surface, it will keep you invested in the plainest things of life. And then guys like me and you, we don't get on here and talk about the plainest things of life. We are actually, philosophers are approaching life through the most antagonistic lens possible, and that is investigating its nature. And it's, like you're saying about existentialists. And so many of them, they're not religious. They've lost that notion because they've transgressed reality in a way that, it's dangerous stuff. The ideas have consequence. There's consequence to shooting someone with a gun, and there's consequence to writing a book.
I wrote that down. The abstract notions we live by have consequences. I thought of that. Like, are we just all living 7 billion different realities simultaneously, and a very small percentage of them are getting most of the lip service,
Well, the one, yes,
keeping our
very
species
much so.
out of extinction?
Yes,
And
our
there's this
games.
whole opportunity we have if we have basic essential needs to struggle with meta notions because
Hmm.
the degree of intensity of our anxiety is reflected through the medium that we represent. So we're in a capitalistic
Hmm.
construct. And so Peterson is going to represent pragmatic philosophical concepts for
Most people.
consumption, creation,
Right.
consumption and creation through that context within a Judeo-Christian framework.
Hmm. Yes, and those frameworks work until they don't. When the anxiety of a society, when the stressors become too much, that's when things break and the abstract nature of our systems become apparent to us. And so we come up with new ideas. And this is
Oh,
the
what this is
struggle of
great.
ideas.
This is what you just did, though. You just addressed this is the opening to Maps and Meaning. Like
Hmm.
that first paragraph.
I don't remember it specifically, but I
The
did
only
as a
reason I do
massive
is because
book.
I keep talking about it on the show because I'm working on something. He
Hmm.
says it. This is his whole thing he's trying to figure out. Something we cannot see protects us or something we do not understand. The
Yes,
thing we
yes,
cannot see is culture in its intrapsychic or internal manifestation. The thing we do not understand is the chaos that gave rise to culture. If the structure of culture is disrupted, chaos returns. We will do
right.
anything. We will do anything, anything to defend ourselves against that return. We will do anything to defend ourselves in against that return. We will worship any god. We will take on any ideology. And ultimately, in the new book, we who struggle with God, he's trying to say on the last page, pretty interesting if you haven't read it yet, that Nietzsche was
I read it.
brilliant.
Yeah,
Did you read it or no?
I read the whole book, but like 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a while, but
No, no, I'm
I did
saying the
read
new
that.
one, we who struggle
Oh,
with God.
oh, oh. No, no, no. I haven't read it yet. No.
Well, on the last page, he says that God is not dead.
Yeah. Well, and how does God reinvest himself into culture, into civilization? He does it
Blood,
antithetically through chaos. Um,
blood,
and that's the
war.
scary part about it. Yes, right.
I
And
said to
so,
Jenna last night, I said, like, hey, I think we're all going to die.
well, we are, but um, so that's the thing that's funny about it. We're wrestling with notions within a bounded framework, anyways. See what I'm saying? And so it's all fractal. It's all fractal. We are. I mean, what's the big deal at the end of the day? But
Eric
but
Weinstein like literally came up at ARC and said, "Hey, World War III." And I tried to find his talk on YouTube and I can't find it anywhere. And I would bet you money that he didn't let them record it because he is like genius. I love this guy so much, Weinstein. I got to hug him at the ARC and
mm,
I didn't tell you that yet. I got to really
mm.
be near him, and he's really wonderful. Um, I think war is what God does.
Yes, well, God in the Bible, there's a passage in Psalms where God says that if I make my bed in hell, thou art there. And it's an old thing that old preachers used to say when I was younger and really ran in those circles. You'd hear it often that that hell is God's judgment after you die. And there's a literal, they're thinking of a literal hell. And war is God's judgment while you're alive. So, and a judgment does is not necessarily an execution against evil doing. A judgment is the outcome of it's the articulation of reason. It's the expression of a reason. It's a formulation, a thing that's taken place. And the judgment is that this is what will happen. The judgment is set. And so it's a calculated response to an equation, which is a very scary thought. Um, the reason I think that I would actually love for us to dialogue and speak sometime about current events politically and with the United States and global events and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah, I
because
like
there are
that
some
idea.
Yeah, there's just some really, really interesting things taking place that the conversation from people that think kind of how I do or how you do, um, it's just not that abundant. There's just not a lot of people talk like the way that maybe Nietzsche would talk about current events. I don't hear people really talking that way about it. Jordan Peterson obviously comes very, very close, and in his works, he addresses it like in this new book that I've not read yet. He's grappling with the very exact same
Well, but
ideas.
I still think Jordan is
He's a defender of
he's
something.
well he and this is not a pejorative statement
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, at all. But I
Right.
believe the framework by which he is addressing it is through one that, it,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I
He's
don't
an,
even,
yeah. There's
so
an
it's
identity
like
that
he's
feels
not an
the
Ubermensch yet.
right, right. Well,
Or yet. I shouldn't even say yet. That's not fair for me to, like, I don't, I don't know if, I think him and his, and his culture is serving an important feedback loop
right.
in the overall. That's why I think Weinstein even showed up to ARC because he doesn't,
Yeah.
he's
He doesn't bounce around
he's
in those
one of the
circles.
advisors. He kind of is living between these worlds. Yeah,
Hmm.
he's
Hmm.
more of an advisor too, or a rabbi too, even though he's an atheist, he's like the rabbi. Um,
You know that he on the like the left is basic him and his brother are basically kooks. They're wacky conspiracy people. And I will admit, a lot of time when I listen to them, I think it's because a lot of what they say come the way that he speaks, his mannerisms, how he talks in a, I don't want to say too much about him because a lot of what he says, I feel like, wow, you're really poking at some deep things there. Other times I'll
yeah,
hear
I
him
want to say
talk.
I think there's a huge place for this is makes me maybe like Foucaultian in a sense, but like for the
Mhm.
kooks and the insane,
Yeah, yeah. No,
which
I don't
I
disagree.
think you were that
I'm just,
you were saying that very loosely. It wasn't like I get it. Right.
yeah, I'm just saying that a lot of the way that I think a lot of my logical thought will originate in intuitions is all. I like to really, before I draw any conclusions on anyone, I will just watch and watch and watch and just
But
take
isn't
it
this the
in.
point of Works in Love? I actually, okay, yes, there's a reflection of the autobiography. Yes, we have
That's a
to.
good way to put that.
Well, that's like in the beginning of Beyond Good and Evil, right? With Kant and
Hmm.
Nietzsche's assessment of what philosophers are, ultimately
Hmm.
representatives of their unconscious, of
Right.
I look at I, like there we like if there are 7 billion different realities and there's a fight for what abstract notions best serve this civilization's continuation,
Hmm.
that the question becomes how integrated is that phenomenon with the phenomenon of meaning? And Jordan's
Right.
work is around meaning, which doesn't
Right.
have to be objective to matter
Doesn't
necessarily.
have to
I mean,
be
isn't that
objective.
Kierkegaard's leap of faith? Like meaning doesn't have to be, but if we all believe in the placebo and then the outcome, it depends what game we're playing. Like you would say,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
what
Right.
game are we
Depends
actually
on,
playing?
right. What game are we playing? How are we going to quantify
But I
and
said that
or
this is, I want to finish this thought. The reason I said I
yeah,
was going on about the autobiography is like, if I'm taking if I'm playing by Kierkegaard's rules and works of love, I can be friends with Eric 5 minutes after I'm talking shit about him because
yes, yes,
because
yes.
it's not
I
really
agree.
about him. It's about us together in this
Yeah.
fight against the evil of our capacity to take on nature's laws or something like
Yeah.
if the murderer never murders again, Well, it's past tense.
If what I said about him felt antagonistic, I'll in real time take it back a little bit. I'll be the first to say I've listened to him speak collectively probably for 25 hours. Like I really listen to a lot of stuff he says. And you're right. There's a place of love in my heart in the sense of love believeth all things in the Kierkegaardian sense. Was I don't know precisely what, probably the Kierkegaard thing. It was an absence of love in my heart on display in real time. And as I observe it and think about it, you are right. I mean, he could. Anyways,
Well, this
I
is
don't know if I'm.
the Kierkegaardian practical value for us is that the tension of our personhood in our in the abstract notions that we embody to to survive and to live and to thrive and to what to
Perpetuate to move forward.
immerse ourselves in the world has that have consequences.
Hmm.
There's an adaptive, transcendent. To me, it seems very reasonable
Hmm.
nature to the unreason of love.
Yes, but so the thing about that is, which is the philosophical thing and the undoing of all of it, is it's all at scales of observation because you go out farther than that, and next thing you know, an asteroid just implodes the planet. See what I'm saying? So it's just it's scales of relevance and the dynamical nature and the give and the wars and the tugging and all of the stuff is only a smaller instantiation of like what is the Earth? I was thinking about this the other. Do you know how empty space is? Like it's eerily empty. Elon Musk was talking about sending a rocket out, and he said once you get out of the Earth's orbit, it's like there's nothing. And so I was talking with actually Chat GPT about this. The Earth the vat of space is like this little bubbly organic thing. In from a logical analysis of it in ether, right? To use the older antiquated language. How does this bubbly organic thing pop up within nothingness? And then you move out farther, and when you look at space at night, it's just like there it all is. And now you've moved into this scale of awareness where now it's like all of the dynamical tension that happens on Earth for all of the reasons that we're talking about. The logicality of it is irrelevant once the whole thing just implodes in a black hole again. And then what happens from there is just it's like an accordion. It's like a repetition of all of that. So that repetitious nature, that give and take of all of it, I think applies to
Well, is Nietzsche's will to power then it was his way of addressing that? I'm sorry,
I
wait.
don't.
No, that's not the right thing I just said. Not the will to power, the what's the oh, I'm sorry, the eternal recurrence. Eternal
Yes, well,
recurrence.
that's why existentialism it kind of can drive you crazy. That's why the thoughts of philosophers. You know, there's a warning in the Bible about philosophy. The Bible actually warns about philosophy, but it says beware of it. It doesn't tell you to not practice it. It doesn't tell you to not think about these things. It's like if a person has a dog and a sign in the window that says beware of dog. It's just a warning that these ideas, while they have their places and it's fun for us to it's most practical for us to boil it down to the implication on governance, on psychology, on pragmatic things. But as you move out, you run into really deep
All
thoughts
right,
that
here's
become very
practical. Then we'll
animalistic.
close with this because I'd like to continue works of love as we go through, like you said, current events and so on.
Hmm.
I think that there's a practical value
Yes.
to not letting someone's mistakes or inadvertent mistakes or intentional evil, not letting it. There's a value in addressing it. There's a value in pointing light towards it in the dark.
Hmm.
The flashlight has a value to be able to see where we're going. And the
Yes.
flashlight has value to see where not to go. And it isn't just a flashlight, it's a candle. And the candle, the fire can be spread. And people, people change, and people change people.
Hmm.
And and you get stronger when you address change. Strong, like even if it's just a will to power,
Hmm.
there's there, killing somebody, putting them in a camp is easier than having your word and your action elevate their reality, if it is even your reality that's elevated above them. Like there's some practical shit here
Hmm.
when you look at love can never be deceived, because if I choose the love, that's an infinite game that I'm playing. Someone else can playing a finite game.
Hmm.
I can always
The energy thing.
I can always call somebody that I okay, practically people have, if you have a problem with your somebody in your family, call them.
Hmm.
Don't wait for them to call. Your whole life will go by. Nathan, closing it out. I guess just what's it, what you say one in your estimation, one practical takeaway from this chapter, love. Love can never be deceived. Love believes all things and yet is never deceived.
My practical takeaway would be hmm, you can receive everything that comes your way, and you can make space. You can take all of it and you can make space, and you may not know exactly how to behave toward an other in a tense situation, in a situation where transgression is taking place or you're being abused or whatever. You might not always have the exact correct answer there, but if you take enough time and behave with enough patience, um, I think that you are more likely to make a better decision than if you just do what in that moment feels like you want to do. Make space for transgression from others and even within the self.
If you're listening to this, thank you for continuing. I would challenge all of you listeners to pick up Works of Love. Here it is if you're watching on YouTube. Um, George Patton said, Works of Love is the essential work in Kierkegaard's entire authorship. Be warned, it is the kind of book that can change your life. Ludwig von Mises once said, I'm sorry, Wittgenstein, not von Mises. Von Mises, I don't know if he ever read Kierkegaard. Maybe. Wittgenstein said, by far the most profound thinker of the 19th century. That says a lot coming from one of the most
Mhm.
profound thinkers of the 20th century, if I remember. Pick up Lorks of Love. Go check out other episodes. Nathan Merrill is a regular on the show. And yeah, look out for our current events, conversations, and some of the other books we'll explore. Please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast and share this with someone that you believe needs to think. We'll see you next time.